Well, good morning. Here we are, ready to have a look at Farnborough Air Sciences Trust Museum on the week where the Farnborough Air Show is taking place, and we can already see through here that there are some pretty interesting aircraft. Let's go and have a look. So we have an Air India Airbus A350 coming into land at Farnborough Airport there, ready for the show today. So here we have what is called the Short Skeet Mark II, which is an aerial target system, so think today's drones, but used from around the 1980s. And here is one of the most iconic British aircraft of all time, the British fighter aircraft, the Lightning. I have an interesting story about the Lightning. My mother used to work for a company called BAE Systems, who were part of the team that created and built and flew these aircraft and supplied them to the Royal Air Force. And she actually burnt her arm on one. She leant against it after it had landed, which clearly probably wasn't the best thing to do. But here you can see what an incredible aircraft it was, and also one of the greatest exported aircrafts that we've ever had, particularly as part of the relationship with Saudi Arabia. So now coming into the museum itself, we have some interesting aircraft. I have to say, I've never seen this one before. This is called a GAF Jindivik ZJ496, and it was intended to provide the Joint British-Australian Weapons Research Establishment in South Australia with a suitable high-speed target to assist in the development of guided missiles and rockets. Quite an interesting thing. Clearly not a manned aircraft. But next to it here we have the Anglo-French Puma, the Puma being quite an iconic helicopter used extensively by the Royal Air Force, particularly with military and rescue in mind. But something interesting about the Puma is that during the 1980s, so between 1981 and 1988, it was used for experimentation into flight dynamics and rotor research. I have to say personally, I wouldn't necessarily want to be on board if it was being used for research, but that's how it works. Here we have an example of a Westland Scout, the XP848 version, and it is a light helicopter that was used primarily by the Army Air Corps of the British Army, and it was used in several conflict zones, including Northern Ireland and the Falklands War. You can see it's quite a light aircraft, so it would have been pretty nimble and agile, but nevertheless intimidating if you saw one of these coming towards you with a vengeance. And here's an interesting one for real aviation enthusiasts. Here we have the Concorde exhaust cowlings. So the Concorde, to achieve its required range and be viable to operate, it needed to be a radically different engine system, and it produced an incredible amount of thrust to get to over supersonic speed. And here are the engine cowlings that would have sat on either side of the wing. Here, quite a privilege indeed to see this. Here we have a part of the fuselage from the Concorde. Now this particular piece here was a fatigue test specimen, so it wasn't actually flown. This was part of the testing of the airframe to make sure that it was airworthy. But you get an idea here at just how small it would have been as an aircraft compared to today's liners. You know, if you compare this against even an A321, but an A380, I mean, it's a lot smaller, but that's probably part of the design to make sure that it could reach those supersonic speeds, using those engines just there. Here we have a Hawker Hunter T Mark 7 called the Lady of the Night. And this actual example was first flown in 1955, but was damaged in a wheels up landing in 1956. And after repair, it was converted to a Mark 7 and returned to the RAF in 1959, where it served in West Germany and also in the Far East before it was issued to this particular museum in 1971. Still in pretty good condition though. This particular aircraft is called the Folland Gnat, and I have to say I don't really know much about this particular plane, but it says it was a British compact swept-wing subsonic fighter aircraft that was developed into an advanced trainer by Folland Aircraft, and it was first flown in March of 1963, and it spent most of its active career with the flight training school. And here really is the nasty part of these aeroplanes, being designed for free-fall nuclear weapons. So here are examples of potential nuclear weapons, and I expect the warhead would be just there. But this particular aircraft here would have had the capability to carry such weapons, and you can see they're not big, but it would have caused incredible destruction in their time. But here is the Anglo-French Jaguar, the XW566, first flown from Wharton in 1971, somewhere that I have been and flown from myself. Here we have a Westland Lynx helicopter, and I think I can get up and have a little look. And there's a look inside the cockpit. Ah, there's a little lady in there. You can see the cockpit in there. And also the slightly better than Ryanair interior at the back. And there we have the Harrier, which I'll be able to go in just a moment.
The pedals and the stick and throttle.
Doing most of the flight, really.
It's difficult to actually vary them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of aeroplanes.
And has that happened before?
What?
But somebody's lost their camera in
Yeah,
here?
well, they've lost their phone, yeah.
Oh, well.
Under the, and it always goes under the seat.
Great. Thank you.
I'll just move it round to get rid of that.
Brilliant. What's that?
Moving map display.
Ah, okay.
The nav attack system.
Oh, very nice.
Designed for the TSR-2 originally, but would have been operated by the navigator in the TSR-2.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to spend a lot of time in here.
No.
It's snug. Thank you very much.
Up high enough for the parachute to open and land him safely.
Wow.
So it needs no forward speed of the aircraft or height. That's why it's called 0-0, 0 speed, 0 height seat. And most modern seats are like that, so the pilot can eject on the ground if something goes wrong.
So, a kind gentleman has now opened the door to this Lynx helicopter, and I can now go inside. So let's go and have a chat. Wow. Okay. So, pretty basic seats. But let's get sat down in here. Sat in a helicopter. This is actually my first time sitting in a helicopter. I've walked inside a Chinook before, but never flown. But you can see here how analog most of these instruments are. Today, I imagine they're full of digital screens and that sort of thing. But let's ask the pilot. Excuse me, ma'am, how do you find flying this aircraft? Do you enjoy it? Well, it appears she doesn't want to converse with me, which is perfectly fine. She's busy. Okay, let's go inside the Puma helicopter. Oh wow, so this one's a lot more spacious. Obviously there is a window down there so you can see outside, and then it just goes right the way back into the tail. But if I pan around and move forward, and I'm crouching down a bit here because it's not the tallest of aircraft, we can go up into the cockpit here, and similar to the previous one, very analog. Wow. Really gives you the idea that it would have been a lot harder to fly than using today's helicopters, which I expect are a lot more digital and computers support the pilots a lot more. Alright, so whilst another aeroplane comes in, Airbus A321, I'm about to go and have a look at the cockpit of this Trident here.
Be polite, you end up with people here sometimes for 45 minutes.
There we go, the cockpit of a Trident, where the navigator would have sat.
I can switch the noise off if you don't want it.
Ah, it's alright, no problem, it makes it more authentic.
Sit in my seat.
There we go.
Acknowledge receipt of information to the 50 unit. Inbound aircraft to
There we are.
You have to video my lunch over there. Behind you.
Oh yeah.
Event of the go around. Follow the SIA's new missed approach. Runway in use. 24. Surface wind. 300 degrees 07 knots. Visibility 10 kilometer or more.
Here we have the winglets from a 747. Wow. An old Cathay Pacific 747. That gives you a bit of an idea of the scale of that bird, given that these are the winglets. And the leading edges here, which are usually heated to avoid ice build-up. Another plane coming in, ready for the Farnborough Air Show. Looks like a military transporter of some kind, but we can just see there in the distance here, Qatar Airways. What is that? That looks like a Dreamliner. The Air India tail just to the right of it, and in the very distance, the Virgin Airlines. But we've had a go around of that aircraft that was just landing. It's now back up into the sky for another. So now we're going to find out a little bit more about the first British powered flight in 1908. And whilst I'm walking in here, if you're ever in the area of Farnborough, absolutely come to the FAST Museum. Not only are the volunteers passionate and knowledgeable, but they really make the experience worthwhile. And there are an incredible array of different aeroplanes, so 100% come along. Now around Farnborough, there's a lot of reference to Samuel Cody, and here we can see he was the first aviator, the first man to fly in a heavier than air powered aircraft in Great Britain, and he was a superb and successful kite flyer as well. But here we have an example of the aircraft, and we can see from this that there is a nod to kites. I have to say, I don't think I would have wanted to personally fly in this aircraft here, but as we approach, you can see it's quite a simple machine, but this is where it all began, the first British powered flight. And the inspiration of kites quite clearly visible across the wings, including this forward wing. Vertical stabilizer up there, and then a tail rudder at the back. So here we have this British Army aeroplane number 1A. It was the first aeroplane to make a powered, controlled and sustained flight in Great Britain on 16th of October 1908 at Farnborough, the home of aviation. And this replica was built by the volunteers from FAST, so the Farnborough Air Sciences Trust. And here it is, built lovingly by the volunteers of this particular trust. Incredible. Here we can see a wheel on the end of the plane that the Farnborough Trust here recreated, and you can see that this would have been part of stabilising the wing here on the end of this beautiful replica. Here is a beautiful model of the Concorde, and we saw earlier on the engine cowlings which would have surrounded the extremely powerful engines that sat back there on either side of the fuselage. And my grandparents, actually, Marjorie and John Spence, flew Concorde a number of times, but particularly I recall my grandma telling me the story of when they flew from Humberside Airport and that the pilot announced when they were hitting supersonic speeds and how exciting it was. Here is an example of another aircraft contemporary with Cody's flyer. So Cody's flyer, the one we've just seen here, and we actually have the Wright flyer. And of course the Wright brothers were the first to make a flight here in the UK, way back in the very early 1900s. So now we step inside another part of the museum, and here what we can see is a mock-up of what it would have been like inside the Concorde, and there will be no one better than my granny and my granddad to tell me if this is an accurate representation of what it might have been like. But we can see here that this is a hostess trolley from the Concorde with all of the drinks on top that you would have expected.
If I select the other display, you can see feet. I'll bring my flight path indicator in between the hockey sticks. So if you do that about now, and also bring that down to level off, that's what we're doing. And it means that you're not in front of the aeroplane, it's doing it for you at that speed.
Here are different artifacts relating to space. So here we see a model of different satellites. And of course the area around Farnborough has been synonymous with satellites, and still to this day in Guildford there is a business dedicated to the satellite industry. What we have here is a model of Concorde which was used in the wind tunnel for aerodynamic testing. And down here we can actually see the model in the wind tunnel itself. And Farnborough does have a wind tunnel which is out of commission at the moment, but it does have one. Behind the drinks trolley there, which also has some caviar and other nice bits of food on, we can see the Roland Klein style stewardess uniform issued to Concorde crews dating from 1985. But you can just imagine sitting there all the way up at nearly 50,000 feet, looking out the window, travelling the speed of sound, getting across to New York in 3.5 hours. So there we go. As I now exit the FAST Museum, the Farnborough Air Sciences Trust Museum, I can't recommend it highly enough. Some amazing artifacts, wonderful volunteers here in Farnborough. Make a trip.